this comes from this comes basically from the endpoint for liberalism, is that, like, because there's no materialist analysis there, you ultimately have to go back to, like, good and evil and, like, spiritual things, idealisms. And you have to say things like, well, actually, Israel is the good guys here and Hamas is the bad guys here. Okay? Let's watch this for now.
Joining me now is the socialist commentator Owen Jones. Owen, you've been sitting there patiently. Your response to Mark Regev there?
A grotesque inversion of reality. I mean, the thing about Israeli spokesperson like that is, if I was told the sky was blue, I'd go out the window and check just to be sure.
What did he say that's wrong?
For one thing, talking about the hospital being used as a terror base. Now, let's just bear in mind that Israel's spokespeople have a long track record of lying through the back teeth. When they shot in the head, for example, Shireen Abu Akleh, they said for months and months and months it was Palestinian gunmen. It wasn't. They shot her in the head. James Miller, a brilliant British documentary filmmaker, shot dead 2002 by the Israelis. Years later, of course, after they denied it.
You wouldn't believe Hamas and their version of events either, would you?
Well, that's why I depend on what aid agencies the United Nations are saying on the ground, which is that collective punishment is being unleashed against the Palestinian people. I mean, look,
you should also mention that, like, the Hamas-backed Gazan Health Ministry has, and I will say this with my entire fucking chest, a longer track record of consistently telling the truth than the IDF does. It's not even a question. Yeah, they took out the last 15 seconds or so with the Israeli soldiers shown on the laptop. I think that's why they took it out, to hide her identity or something.
We can see already the evidence they've been unveiling for what they said was a terror hub, including showing CDs and a computer. What they've done to that hospital is, firstly, because they cut off energy in a total siege, which they justified by saying they were fighting human animals, which should be considered genocidal rhetoric, has been condemned as such.
Well, it should certainly be condemned, and they should not have the ability, Israel, to cut off water and power and fuel.
That is collective punishment. Can we agree? Under Article 33, that's against the law. It's a war crime. Can we agree? I think we should have some consensus.
I would argue you're heading towards collective punishment when you do that.
You're not heading towards collective punishment when you cut off energy and water to the entire civilian population.
Except to play devil's advocate and to give their side of it, which I've heard repeatedly, take the issue of fuel. They want to try and get fuel in, the Israelis, as they've said, to the hospitals, to the humanitarian side of this, but they know that Hamas are taking that fuel and using it for their military.
The hospital authorities, who we should listen to, have rebutted those accusations. Look, what's happened here is babies right now are gasping for breath and suffocating. We've had several nurses and patients shot dead. In fact, this whole hospital has been described by medical staff as a mortuary.
But you don't know.
When a hospital becomes a mass grave, when dozens of decomposing bodies have to be buried in a mass grave in a hospital, we're talking what you said. Can I just quote something you said about Putin? And I think this was very wise. You said in March 2022, I'm seeing a genocidal monster killing women and babies in maternity hospitals as we sit back and let him do it. Why was it so disgraceful? But you were right. You were right to be
emotional. Here's the difference.
Why when you see this hospital, is there not the same fury?
Let me explain.
Here's the difference. The babies, did they have a copy of Mein Kampf? Here's the difference. The babies were Ukrainian and rotten.
Because the two are, in my opinion, morally very different. In one case, Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, he was committing war crimes, having illegally invaded wait a second, let me finish. Having invaded a sovereign democratic country. Here, it was Israel that was invaded by a vast number of terrorists who murdered over 1,500 innocent men, women, children. They kidnapped 240 people, including babies, children, Holocaust survivors. So my point is, morally, there is a massive difference.
Hold on.
Morally, it's a massive difference. Now, the question of the hospital, wait a sec. The question of the hospitals is this to me. They have so far produced some evidence of Hamas.
Dude, what the fuck are you saying? You goddamn charlatan. That's insane. Hey, dumbass. War crimes are war crimes. It doesn't matter like who struck the first shot, even though to say that October 7th is the first time anything happened in the apartheid regime is ridiculous. God, he's so annoying. Get his ass.
Operating inside the hospital. For me, so far, as a journalist trying to be fair and impartial, I don't think, as you've heard me say to Mark Regev, I don't think I've seen enough evidence here, which says to me this was a sprawling command centre. But there is a moral difference between what Putin's doing in Ukraine and what Israel's doing to defend itself against Hamas, isn't there?
Hold on.
Isn't there?
No, sorry, this is the difference, okay, if you want to talk about that or trying to separate them. For a Ukrainian ordinary civilian being killed or for an ordinary Palestinian child being killed.
Both equally awful.
None of them did anything wrong. No. We agree on that, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We absolutely agree on that. Yes, we do. Now, when you repeatedly denounced Putin for his genocidal behaviour in Ukraine, do you stand by that? Do you think that's a genocide?
Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't matter what the basis for what the operation...
Of course it does.
No.
It does.
No, Piers, in terms of what actually has happened...
Piers is such a dumbass because he acts like this is the limitation of liberalism, okay? If you do good and bad politics, you will get fucking destroyed by someone who at least knows what the fuck they're talking about. Dog. Putin has made justifications as to why he needs to invade Ukraine as well. Okay? Whether it be NATO incursion or Ukraine being in the Western sphere of influence or my favorite, the denazifying Ukraine strategy. Okay? That doesn't make it right. That doesn't make it righteous, and that doesn't make it correct. So you can't fucking turn around and be like, but Israel's invasion protocols are actually totally justifiable. Because they said that they are denazifying Gaza. You can always say this. The idea that, like, we don't believe Russia when they say they're denazifying Ukraine, but we do believe Israel when they say they're denazifying Gaza is ridiculous. No, this is not sticking up for Azov. I have covered the Azov battalion and us arming them and training them for years, okay? Years prior to Russia invading Ukraine, as a matter of fact. Something that liberals conveniently fail to mention whenever they shit on me for my coverage over Ukraine. Oh, I'm doing pooty-poo Vladimir Putin propaganda. This does not justify invading Ukraine. My position on this is clear.
We can talk. What about the massacre, the obscene massacre of 1,000
Israelis? What Israel's doing is not genocide.
Piers.
You can't keep saying let's
talk about genocide. Let's talk about genocide. Yeah. Why is it?
Let me tell you the difference between genocide. Let me put something to you, and you come back at me and tell me if I'm wrong. Hamas, from its charter onwards, and from the spokesman said last week, is dedicated to the eradication of Israel and killing as many Jews as it can possibly kill. That is the purest definition of genocide intent that you will ever see. And they executed it on October the 7th as best they could. Now, what Israel's doing in response, and they've been very firm about this, and the international courts...
I hate this. Like, how can you point to the fucking Lebanese Hamas guy saying Israel's occupation on the Palestinians makes it so that 1,000 fucking October 7th is justifiable, which is not a statement I agree with, by the way, mind you, and is a very violent statement for the record, okay? That is indicative of someone's genocidal intent, but the Likud party's charter or the many members that have democratically been elected into the Knesset to hold a tremendous amount of power in Israel and all the genocidal intent and statements that they've made while engaging in the act of ethnic cleansing, that's fine. That's justifiable. Just say, oh, fuck.
These are very long questions.
They're not. I'm answering a point and I'm putting one to you, right? In my estimation, they are qualitatively different. What Hamas is publicly what it's doing is genocide. What Israel's doing is not genocide.
There's a difference between what Israel, you could say both Israel and Hamas have engaged in genocidal and murderous rhetoric.
No.
And I'll give you an example. Yes, they have.
No, you can't.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
No,
I can. Is it uncensored or not?
Yes. You can say
Let me quote what the the Israeli authorities have said.
Go on.
Benjamin Netanyahu, when he quoted Amalek, the scriptures, what does Amalek say? He quotes Amalek when they attacked the Israelites. And what God told the Israelites to do was to destroy kill every man, woman, child, and livestock. If I would put it to you, an Islamist leader was quoting a similarly genocidal passage from the Quran, you would not, I would say,
Can I respond?
hesitate.
Can I respond?
We haven't. Just no. But you've had a lot.
Respond to that
I'm going
point.
to respond just quickly. Israeli officials said that Gaza will end up being a city of tents with no building standing. That they are attacking for damage, not for accuracy. The agricultural minister Avi Dikti, he said we are rolling out a new Nakba. A Nakba is the mass expulsion, 700,000 Palestinians in 1948. This is why hundreds of genocide scholars, people who are actually, unlike you and I, experts in the field of genocide studies, fear that a genocide is taking place. So the difference between Israel and Hamas is Hamas does not have the capacity to wipe out Israel.
Russia is objectively less brutal with just as much potential to enact harm. Israel is far worse than Russia enacting an actual genocide. This equation is ridiculous. Fuck Russia, but be fair. I said this before. If we're doing lesser evil politics, Hamas is less evil than Israel, okay? With the amount of civilian to military casualties that they engaged in on October 7th, in comparison to the fucking month-and-a-half long bombing campaign and subsequent 2-week-long boots-on-the-ground invasion, Israel has done far worse. Like, just looking at the numbers on the board, nothing else. The debate bro response to this is to point out genocide can't be justified. Ask Piers if he thinks Jews had actually been controlling the media and if that would justify the Holocaust. I mean, basically, yeah. This comes from This comes basically from the endpoint for liberalism, is that, like, because there's no materialist analysis there, you ultimately have to go back to, like, good and evil and, like, spiritual things, idealisms. And you have to say things like, well, actually, Israel is the good guys here and Hamas is the bad guys here. Okay? Problem is, say that. When you say that, see, look, this guy went, then Nazism is less evil than communism just by the numbers. First of all, the numbers of directly murdered under Nazism versus the numbers directly murdered under communism are not comparable. Over the time, you have to look at the murders done by the state per the time frame that they engaged in it. That is why the double genocide theory is inherently anti-Semitic and also a type of Holocaust revisionism that weirdos in the West engage in. You can't come in here and be like, actually, what about 100 million killed by communists? When the 100 million dead literally features those who could have been born, who weren't born as a consequence of famine, Nazis that were literally killed in the hands of the Red Army, and pretty much everything, like unborn Nazi children as well. When you look at the actual, I'm not saying it is both bad. No, shut the fuck up. There's no both sides in this circumstance. Get the fuck out of here. Look at the fucking allied military and allied civilians as a percentage of total deaths. Fuck out of here with this bullshit. So you're already wrong. You're already fucking wrong on the numbers, and you tried to do it in a way where you're like engaging in Holocaust revisionism. And it's an idiotic assessment. The correct one you could have made is like, well, look at the German casualties in Nazi Germany, right? Look at the German civilian population casualties in Nazi Germany. Was that not justified? Well, we did the Geneva Conventions afterwards, so I feel like the people who carried out those acts don't consider it to be justified. I'm just saying. You don't have to literally point to the one part of World War II that is like, questionable. It's also ridiculous to compare Hamas to the Nazis in this circumstance, you have to be the most disingenuous person to make such a comparison, because the militarized death machine, the machine of death in this circumstance, if we're looking at the two parties, and whichever one is like both ideologically, for like whatever religious or ideological reasons as to why they're committing these atrocities, and also has the capacity to commit atrocities, and has a machine that is committing such atrocities, if we're looking at these two parties, the one that's closer to that comparison is Israel, not Hamas. Get the fuck out of here. One has an apartheid state. The other one is a reactionary, retaliatory, militant faction that has been born out of the violence that people have been subjected to under such gruesome and violent conditions. It's fucking so stupid. One has nukes. Shut the fuck up.
Israel is wiping Gaza off the map. That's the point.
But no, you've actually exposed the weakness in your argument. Israel does have the ability to kill everyone in Gaza tomorrow, and they're not doing it.
Oh.
In fact, well, hang on. What they're doing, and it's indisputable, they are issuing a number of warnings repeatedly to people to go south. Wait. And stay out of northern Gaza, right? And then they're pulverizing it with airstrikes, and now they've gone in on the ground, and they're waging battle with Hamas fighters, terrorists, right? No, hang on. So my point is this.
Yeah, they're pulverizing babies with airstrikes, weakening the Palestinians and their defenses. They fortified their defenses with baby bodies.
Israel could, if they wanted to, kill everyone in Gaza. They decided not to do that.
Is your definition,
genocide is where you want to kill everyone.
Sorry.
So you're not considering Hamas a terror organization? Hamas has a civil governance faction and also paramilitary units. Depending on the actions conducted by said paramilitary units, it can be an organization that conducts acts of terror. October 7 is a great example of this. That is an act of terror. Okay? 100%. I can't believe that it's been literally a month and a half, and motherfuckers, and you know, so many dead in the hands of Israel, and people still turn around and go, well, you know, you should condemn Hamas. I have 1,000,000 times over. Terrorism is a political designation. It is a political designation given to non-state actors in an effort to deny them any kind of habeas corpus protections. That's the real reason why people are considered terrorists. That's the reason why Israel, even though Israel deals a tremendous amount of state-sponsored militarized terror upon the Palestinian population, both in the maintenance of the apartheid state, but also in the sieges that it conducts in Gaza, is not considered a terrorist organization.
Right. Your definition of genocide, because in Ukraine, Vladimir Putin hasn't killed every last Ukrainian. That's simply not happened. No, he hasn't. And nor has he stated his intention to do so, and nor as brutal and barbaric.
Vladimir Putin, absolutely, by illegally invading a sovereign country and indiscriminately bombing anything in front of him.
Indiscriminately bombing.
Is waging a form of genocide.
Wow. Indiscriminate bombing. Gaza, more than 2 Hiroshima bombs.
Yeah. Also, wait, I don't get it. Like, is he saying Israel is demonstrating restraint because they have nukes? Okay, so does Russia. Like, I don't get it. Like, in the eyes of Piers Morgan, like, I guess, you know, not all nukes are considered the same. Like, at the top of the hour, there's a nuke. It's a 3-minute ad break. Now, that can be avoided. It's like a fallout shelter, maybe more than a fallout shelter. It can be avoided by subscribing for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. By connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Here's the 3-minute ad break now. Well, yeah. Ultimately, Russia has fucking nukes. They could have nuked Ukraine. They could have nuked Ukraine, but they didn't. Are we going to celebrate their fucking restraint? That's ridiculous.
Bombs worth have been dropped on East London in the space of 5 weeks.
Okay, let me ask you two questions.
No, you said Ukraine. No, I'm going to have to put this to you.
Okay.
15,000 people have now been killed now by the Israelis, estimate, in Gaza. 1 in every 200 people in Gaza have now been killed. If you were to adjust for population in Ukraine, that would be 300,000 Ukrainian civilians. 300,000, there's been a terrible death toll. It's estimated by the UN 10,000 civilians have been killed since February last year. In the space of 5 weeks, a country with a much, much smaller population has had a much higher, has had a death toll higher officially than that in Ukraine. So how can it be?
I'm going to answer.
How can it
God, he's so British. Like, even the way he goes,
be that you
Very
call
nice.
that genocide,
Yeah.
but when you have nearly half the entire civilian death toll of the Bosnian War in a country which is twice the size in terms of population, why isn't that genocide based?
Well, I've just answered your question by saying if Israel wanted to commit genocide, they would simply
So would Russia.
They would vaporize.
So would Russia. They would nuke Ukraine.
Russia wants to take over Ukraine.
Yes, and
it
they want to
it will
take over
kill-
Gaza.
And it will kill any number of Ukrainians, men, women, and children in that process.
The death rate
But it's able to. The
death rate in Gaza is much,
hang
much
on,
higher.
The only reason it hasn't is
Right.
that actually Ukraine has a large military supported by countries like the United States and is putting up one hell of a fight.
Russia has nuclear weapons.
Okay. And
Russia.
by the way, Ukraine gave theirs up. It should have had them.
Russia has an armed force.
Let me ask you.
yeah, me and Piers actually agree with this. That's crazy. Yeah. Ukraine, never give up the nukes, dog. Fucking told you, son. Never give up the nukes.
No, you've got to accept this.
Hang on. No. I'm going to accept anything.
A far lower death rate in Ukraine.
I've
as
explained why.
abominable as
I've
it is.
explained why.
You haven't explained
Yes,
why.
I have. Well, let me explain
Israel
again.
have made it clear.
You didn't hear me.
Israel have made it clear
Let me
that they
explain-
intend to occupy
Let me
Gaza
explain it.
permanently.
Yeah, which they should not be allowed to do.
And what did
we
the
can agree on that.
What did the Israeli ministry leaked intelligence?
Let me-
What did the intelligence
Sorry, mate,
ministry
it's
leak?
my interview of you.
I know, but
not your interview of me.
Well, I think you do need to be held to
Let me
account on
answer you. Let me answer you. Well, let me ask you two questions,
Okay.
which I asked Jeremy Corbyn.
Sure.
Let's get these off the table. Do you believe Hamas is a terror group?
Yes, if you engage in violence against civilian population, that's terrorism.
Okay, wait, don't do supplementaries. Let me just ask you this.
What do you mean don't do supplementaries? What the fuck does that mean? No. This entire conversation is once again immediately revealed. Like, the goal of this conversation is immediately revealed when you go, don't add any qualifiers. Why? What do you mean don't add any qualifiers? Don't add any additional context to the fucking violence. What's the purpose of having a conversation then? What's the purpose of having this conversation? It's so stupid. Yeah, no, it's just to be like, yeah, Hamas is terrorists. That's why everything you do to Palestinians, because they're technically Hamas or might be Hamas or Hamas in training, Hamas in the making, is justifiable.
Second question, which I asked him and she couldn't answer. Should Hamas remain in power?
If I could wave a magic wand, then no, obviously there'd be an independent, let me finish.
Okay.
There'd be an independent Palestine, free of Israeli rule, with a secular democratic movement in power. The difference
I agree with you.
When you courageously stood against the Iraq war, and you were courageous for doing so, what was the argument put against you? That you wanted to keep Saddam Hussein in power even though he gassed his own people, the Kurds, and committed genocide, many would argue, that he had invaded his neighbour, and that he had massacred the Shia when they rose up in 1991. Now, your argument against that was that what could happen next would be far, far worse. And you were
Actually,
right.
that wasn't my argument.
Well, that is the argument.
No.
Did you want to keep Saddam Hussein in power?
Don't tell me what my argument was. I know what it was. I was editor of the paper that waged the campaign.
Did you want
my
Saddam
argument
Hussein to
was,
remain in power?
I did not believe that they had produced any evidence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. I thought he had nothing to do with 9/11. Therefore, we were waging a completely irrelevant war, which I thought would stir up absolute hell in the Middle East. And you know what? I was right.
Yeah.
And actually, most of the architects of that war now concede they were wrong.
Yeah, they were.
It was a horror story from start to finish. But what it did do is spark the rise of ISIS. And what the world did with ISIS was say, this crosses a moral line. We have to get rid of them. And we went after ISIS in places like Iraq and Syria and other countries. And in bombing the hell out of ISIS, a lot of civilians got killed.
You just skipped a lot of very important history.
Wait a minute.
No, that's not what happened.
Well, that is what happened.
No, that's not what happened.
One of the consequences of the Iraq war was that ISIS became a very powerful, for a short period of time, global terror force committing atrocity after
Can I just correct your version of history?
But in wiping out ISIS pretty effectively, we also killed a lot of civilians.
No, what actually happened?
What's the moral difference between that and what Israel's doing in Gaza?
You just revised history. We were told that Al-Qaeda was perhaps in league with Saddam Hussein. That was one of the justifications of invading. What actually happened after the invasion was that it became a playground for Al Qaeda, who you've missed out, I've noticed.
No.
And what happened?
We know about Al Qaeda. I'm talking about ISIS.
What happened, for example, is Fallujah, the city of Fallujah in Iraq. The Americans went in and they massacred people protesting against their rule, and many of those Sunni populations ended up driven into the arms of Al Qaeda. A brutal counterinsurgency program then resulting in mass slaughter of innocent Sunni civilians, and from that fury and anger, something even worse than Al Qaeda emerged.
Piers Morgan at this moment has very successfully shifted the conversation's main focus away from Israel's horrific, historic war crimes against a broadly civilian population full of women, children, and the elderly. 73% of the people that Israel has killed has been women, children, and the elderly. Okay? And he did it. He did it very successfully. Now, Owen Jones took the bait and is going along with it and arguing against them on those conditions.
Just as
ISIS.
Yes.
So you agree
and
with
that was that's exactly what we're seeing today.
I didn't give every detail of the journey.
No.
I just said out of the Iran
misunderstood. You've misunderstood.
Right.
They engaged in a brutal counterinsurgency.
No, I know the story.
Offensive against Al Qaeda, and that caused something worse to emerge. Just as in Afghanistan.
I know.
Just as Afghanistan, we had 2 decades of occupation.
Listen, we're running out of time.
2 decades of occupation, and the Taliban emerged stronger than ever. The same applies to both what happened in Iraq and Afghanistan.
It seems to me...
Because if you brutalise a population,
stop talking, Owen.
you will turn them into terrorists.
Stop talking.
Or extremists. Drive them to their arms.
You make a lot of good points. I agree with a lot of things you say.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of things you say, but also I'm going to still keep saying I'm fair and balanced while simultaneously defending Israel by going, Israel has a right to defend itself. And also it's very different when Israel bombs a hospital. They are defending themselves from Hamas babies. Whereas when Russia bombs a Ukrainian hospital, well, they are defending themselves from the Nazi Azov Brigade is what they say. But of course, I don't believe that because it's fucking bullshit. But I can't have that same level of cynicism and criticism when Israel is doing it because, it's Israel is our ally. It's an ally of the West, and its enemies are seen as enemy combatants, Muslims.
Right, always have done, actually. I find the way you say them, as you do with me, quite annoying. But that's fine. You're allowed to, and we're uncensored. Come back. I want to end, if I can, with some kind of... Look, we've agreed Hamas is a terror group. We've agreed they have to go. How do we actually get peace here?
Well, firstly, we have to deal with the underlying causes of what's driven the Palestinian people in the case of Gaza into the hands of Hamas, which is, starting in 1948, the ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population in the Nakba, with 700,000 driven from their homes, murderously, I might add. Then... And
hundreds of thousands of Jews were driven from their homes before that.
In Palestine.
Bro, stop it, dude. Stop. You can't... Dude, I hate this. I hate this argument always and forever, dude. It's just like... Oh, well, the Nakba happened, but here is why it was permissible. Yes, what I think is there's horrifying violence occurring in Gaza right now, but of course, here is why it's permissible. Like, you can't always try to contextualize Israel's first strikes, okay? At a certain point, you have to be like, all right, well, the disproportionate violence only seems to go in one direction. So fuck. It's so funny that, like, the Zionist crimes against Palestinians are always contextualized as, like, well, Arabs attack them in other countries. Whereas the Israeli crimes against the very same Palestinians are always contextualized in that way. But Hamas, which is one fucking militant faction, okay, will never get the same comprehension as to, like, how that violent retaliation occurs, how that violent retaliation directly is at least targeted towards the perpetrators and civilians that live under that banner, but still the perpetrator being the state of Israel and its apartheid regime. There is no fucking Hamas and no militant retaliation without an apartheid state. It doesn't work that way.
Palestine.
Well, they were driven away from Arab countries.
Hold on.
They were driven away from Arab countries.
Yeah, from Palestine.
Jonathan Friedland wrote a very good piece about this, saying, you know what, if you go into the history, there's just cause on both sides.
The Palestinians were driven from their homes, 700,000 of them. And then we had the illegal settlements and colonization, including in the West Bank, were completely unremarked upon.
And I've already condemned
there was mass terror,
settlements of
illegal settlements, and as well as Amnesty International, as Human Rights Watch and B'Tselem describe it, the Israeli Human Rights Organization, a system of apartheid.
But
if you keep brutalizing the Palestinian people, ridding them of their freedom, and you end up now in Gaza with parents picking up the burned, dismembered remnants of their children, Owen, there will never be peace.
I agree. What I would say to that is that on the Arab side, they have had multiple opportunities to do a peace deal, not least in 2000 with Arafat, and he walked away.
No, what happened there? Go on. What were the concessions?
Well,
because
the truth is Bill Clinton, who helped forge peace in Northern Ireland brilliantly with Tony Blair and with the others involved there, that actually Arafat, they had peace in their grasp, and as Bill Clinton said to him, I'm going to end up being a failure because of you and looking away.
And that revision of history again, not just from you on this program, but by Bill Clinton, because they demanded, for example, land swaps for a ratio 9 to 1 in favour of Israel.
Come back again.
I'd love to.
No, seriously, this conflict's not going away.
No, sadly
it's going to continue raging the war. I think you're an important voice in this. We should keep talking about it.
Okay, we'll chat.
Anyway, so Piers needs to condemn something once. He must be superpowered to condemn that hard. No, it's just... Here,